So the problem that the Global Agenda Council on Population Growth seeks to address is that the world does not have an institution of global governance that regards rapid population growth as its central focus. The closest thing that we have today is the UNFPA. That organization used to focus on population growth and on the design and implementation of family planning programs that were aimed at encouraging and enabling lower fertility. But following the 1994 Cairo Conference on Population and Development, the UNFPA shifted its agenda to a much more micro focus, an individual level focus on sexual and reproductive health and rights and gender equity. In other words, it shifted away from this macro focus on population growth. In some countries, the bottom-up individual approach of the UNFPA has yielded results with respect to population growth. In others, it hasn't. So we may no longer have a global population bomb, but what we do have today are population cluster bombs that are exploding in dozens of countries around the world. The result is going to be an increase of 2.4 billion people in the next 4 decades, concentrated almost entirely in those countries and at great peril to their economic and political and social situations. The Global Agenda Council on Population Growth has a proposal to address this issue that focuses on the UNFPA, and we call it the 4 R's proposal. The first R calls on the UNFPA to reaffirm the world's interest in global and national rates of population growth. The second R calls on the UNFPA to reassert its leadership in the population area. That involves taking the lead on communication and coordination among different UN agencies, among private organizations that implement family planning and reproductive health programs, and also with political leaders. The third R calls on the UNFPA to rebalance its portfolio. In other words, the UNFPA has to increase the activities it undertakes that focus on macro-level population issues, especially strategic analyses related to the integration of population and development planning. And the final R calls on the UNFPA to subject its activities to periodic review by a non-political technical advisory group that will report to the Secretary General of the UN on UNFPA strategy and performance relative to its goals. In order to accomplish the 4 R's proposal, we need a meeting of the minds of one key group, and we also need 3 key players on board as well. First, we have to, of course, pay heed to the power of the purse and make sure that the UNFPA's actual and potential funders are on board with the proposal. Second, the Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, needs to support the rebranding of the UNFPA, both inside and outside the UN system, as the world's go-to organization for population issues. Third, we have to have buy-in from the executive director of the UNFPA, and as a practical matter, that requires a very thoughtful process for selecting the next executive director, because the current one is in the final year of her term. And finally, the UN Population Division, which is the UN's internal think tank for collecting and analyzing population data, needs to be better aligned and to work more closely with the UNFPA. Now, we think this proposal has a good chance to have some impact because it leverages the unique aspects of the UNFPA and it simultaneously circumvents the UNFPA's greatest liability. By making the UNFPA the centerpiece of global governance with respect to population growth, number one, the proposal takes advantage of the legitimacy of the UNFPA. It also takes advantage of the UNFPA's power to call on ministers of planning, ministers of finance, ministers of social development, and so on, which private enterprises and NGOs are rarely able to do. In addition, the proposal takes advantage of the UNFPA's decentralized structure and network and its appreciation of differences across country and cultural settings. And the proposal makes better use of technical resources in the population field, which has the added benefit of promoting transparency and accountability. Another key feature of this proposal is that it focuses the UNFPA's efforts more squarely on high-level strategy, communication, and coordination. By outsourcing on-the-ground service delivery to proven implementing agencies, we think that's a very practical way to work around the bureaucratic inertia that paralyzes all UN organizations. Now, to make this proposal a reality, we think 3 things need to happen. First, the UN needs to acknowledge the problem. The first thing people do, and I tell you this not from personal experience, but the first thing people do when they attend an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting is they stand up and say, "I am an alcoholic." It would be a big step forward if Ban Ki-moon stood up and said, "The world has a population problem." Second, we need a mandate from the World Economic Forum to fully work out the details of our plan. Third, we need a meeting of key UNFPA donors and UN policymakers at which the plan can be presented and considered. Our main objective here is to mix and stir both the UNFPA's current bottom-up individual approach with a modern form of its traditional top-down aggregate approach. Thank you.
All right, so David, thank you.